Hello and welcome to the M is for Mama podcast. I'm your host, Abby Halberstadt, happy wife, mama to 10, Bible-believing Christian. And on today's episode, we're going to do story time, Valentine's Day weekend story time to be exact. And I think you guys are going to enjoy it. Plus, hopefully get some nuggets of truth and good principles from it. Before I dive in, I want to highlight our podcast sponsor, Voteberg Music Academy, which is a wonderful way to encourage your students to learn together. In fact, with my code MSForMama20, you get 20% off each month that you're enrolled that you can share between siblings, between the instruments of mandolin, guitar, ukulele, fiddle, and piano. So it's way less than you would normally pay for students in individual lessons and individual instruments. And it's a great way to jump them right into song-based learning. They even send pins and badges to your door to motivate your students to practice more so you don't have to nag them to do it. Remember, you can use the code MSForMama20 for 20% off every month that you're enrolled. Also, I want to highlight my friend Corey from Good Book Mom, who creates biblically sound book lists for ages 0 to 12. In the month of February, she's got first chapter books, books that affirm biblical marriage and gender, and crush-free Valentine's books that you can check out for your kids. You can use the code Abby5 for $5 off, or Abby75 gets you an all-access yearly subscription for just $75. I'll put the link in the show notes. Okay, I told you that it was going to be story time. This past weekend, on Valentine's Day weekend, we actually started out with Valentine's Day being pretty low-key, which is fine. We are not huge Valentine's Day people. But more low-key than usual, I would say, because we had a basketball game for our son, Simon, who is 17, and he plays for our homeschool basketball league. And there is a coach who has a very understanding wife, as far as I'm concerned, who keeps scheduling games during the evening on Valentine's Day evening when, usually if you were going to have a special dinner, that's when you'd be having it. So we were at a game at 6 p.m. Our super kind twins, Evie and Nola, made a special dinner for our whole family. And so we did a family Valentine's dinner, and that was kind of the big hurrah for that day. But Shaun had seen a pickleball tournament in Dallas that was a mixed doubles, couples, Valentine's Day, feel the love kind of tournament. And he had registered us for that, and we were going away for a night. And so we excitedly packed all of our stuff up and got in the car, and I had my breakfast with me. I had my supplement drink that I always put in a mason jar with the lid on. And then I had a jar of raw milk. And so my arms were full of bags, and I was carrying the mason jar with the lid and the mason jar without the lid in the same crook of the same elbow. And my brain had very briefly pinged and said, you should probably put a lid on the milk too. But I was like, I'm going to drink it as soon as I get in the car. Once I get situated, I'll already be drinking it. It's not a problem. Well, I was wrong. I should have listened to my brain. I get in the car. I get all the bags put away. I'm still kind of clenching these two mason jars in the crook of my elbow. And as I go to transfer them to my hands, my brain just short circuits. And I pick up the one without a lid, the one with milk in it first, and proceed to aggressively slosh it all over Shaun's console of his car. And it looked so intentional, because it kind of was, because my brain thought that I had grabbed the one with the lid and therefore I didn't need to be careful. And I was just going to put it in the cup holder. It was not going to be a big deal. I mean, how could it? The lid was screwed on tightly. No, that's not what actually happened. I grabbed the one without the lid and used the same lack of care as if it had a lid, and ended up with milk everywhere. And Shaun happened to turn his head just as I did this. And of course, to the casual observer, it looked like that I had just tried to christen his entire front of his car with milk. And he just looked at me and said, why? How? Like, what were you thinking? And I said, I was thinking that this had a lid on it. I'm sorry, my bad. And thankfully, he's a very gracious guy, and he took it in stride. But what I wanted to say about telling this story to you is that I really felt like several events this past weekend sort of cemented or reminded me of lessons and principles that I already know, that I've been taught. And then also that I felt myself learning principles again, if not for the first time, that really need to be pounded in my brain sometimes. And the things that were enforced in that moment of frustration as we're trying to get out the door, we've gotten our bags all packed, it's hard if you have a lot of kids, or any number of kids, I should say, to go away for a night. And so we had hauled all of our stuff out there, gotten ourselves situated, and here I am throwing milk all over the car. So we get napkins and towels and start scrubbing. And I set the mason jar, which was not empty, on kind of the pull-up console in between the two seats and completely forgot about it. And so did he. It wasn't really out of sight, out of mind. I could see it if I turned my head, but I was fully focused on scrubbing the last drops of milk out of the crevices of the seat that I was sitting in. It was all over me, all over everything. Because, let's be honest, 8 ounces of milk in a mason jar looks like nothing. 8 ounces of milk, or even half of it, sloshed out of it onto everything, suddenly feels like you took 2 full bottles of something and just deliberately dumped them everywhere. It feels like a lot of liquid. So I'm still working on that. He pulls out of our garage, goes down a long driveway, turns onto the road leading away from our house. And then we eventually come to a T in a road. And I teased him later that he must have just gunned it and really cranked the wheel and really done a super aggressive turn, but he didn't. He just did a normal turn. And the normal turn was all it took for that open jar of milk, which we had both forgotten about, and specifically me, because it was my jar of milk that I brought into the car, to tip over. And I think I probably honestly only spilled about 2 or 3 ounces the first time, even though it seemed like a lot. Well, the rest of it seemed like an ocean. It was all over my bag, all over his puffer coat, all over the dress that I had not packed in my bag so that it wouldn't get wrinkled, all over shoes and the floorboards. And so he just looked at me like, are you serious again? And I am over there just spluttering and apologizing and trying to justify myself, but not too much because there's really not much to justify. It was really, really not a good move on my part. So there's a gas station right up the road from us, and we pulled in to get gas, and we got those, rough brown paper towels that they have available for when you need to clean your window or your windshields. And we're grabbing handfuls of those and scrubbing away, fully aware that this is raw milk. It is going to spoil for sure after it's been left out, and it's probably going to smell. So yay, great job, Abby. But I will say this, principles that I was reminded of. We get to choose how we react to any set of circumstances. And while I knew Shaun was frustrated and a little flabbergasted that we did this not once, but twice, the first time was bad enough, and that we were trying to get out the door and like, what a hassle kind of thing, I will say that he took it in stride, as he often does, but I think he took it more in stride than he would have 10 years ago. And I will say that I was less defensive and more able to let it roll off my back and not berate myself or try to make excuses or get fixated on that and let it ruin the mood, the buoyancy of, hey, we get a night away. This is going to be really fun. And just take it for what it was, which was an unfortunate double whammy of brain dead clumsiness on my part, and just move on. So we scrubbed and scrubbed as best we could. And we got on our way in a good mood still. I feel like sometimes these things that really aren't that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. Yes, his car did end up smelling like spoiled milk later. Sorry, babe. But they're truly not catastrophic. We can blow out of proportion so easily and allow to set the tone for the rest of everything, whether it's a weekend away or the rest of the day or a special date that we're going on or a conversation that we need to have. So that felt really good. Not the actual spilling of the milk. That didn't feel great. And my elbow definitely was very sticky and didn't smell great for the rest of the day. But it felt good to see progress. It felt good to see maturity. It felt good to see growth in that area where neither one of us let something like that ultimately affect much of anything. So we were able to joke about it and are still joking about it. And I'm sure that it will be a story that we reference many times over every time I walk around with a mason jar full of milk without a lid on it, which should be never. And we got on our way to Dallas and entered our next set of potentially challenging circumstances. So we do eventually make it to Dallas, and we play in this pickleball tournament that's a mixed doubles, couples, Valentine's Day weekend kind of thing. We only lost one game. We got bronze, because we lost the wrong game, and we only lost it by 2 points. And I have to tell you that I thought that all of my competitive spirit had drained out in my 30s, having lots of kids. If I play board games, I don't care who wins. If I play card games, I'm not that competitive. It's kind of like, whatever. I'm not that into it. But then I started playing pickleball, got back into sports because as a kid, I played all the sports. Whatever I could play, I played, and I was very competitive. I wanted to win, very like, grr, get after it. I see it in one of my daughters, and Evie. She chases them down and, goes 120% for the ball and all of that. And I was like that. And I was really, really hard on myself. And I just really thought that part of me was pretty much done. Come to find out, pickleball has resurrected the part of me that gets really upset at myself, but also, sadly, at people that I love that I play with if I don't feel like we're living up to our potential. And particularly Shaun, whom I've already mentioned is one of the nicest, most generous-hearted people I know. So, yeah, it has been interesting to see this sin nature welling up in me because Ephesians 4 tells us, in your anger, do not sin, or be angry and do not sin. But it definitely doesn't say get mad because you lost by 2 points and then struggle with, your ungodly rage and have to tamp it down and keep your mouth shut and then fail miserably and have to apologize. Because that at 42 years old is a reality for me sometimes. And as sad as that is to admit, I am telling you that is one of the things that I'm still learning, that even those sins and frustrating tendencies and proclivities that we think that we have put to death sometimes pop back up and are like, nope, I'm alive again. Here I go again in a different context. And maybe I'm not as strong as I used to be, or maybe in some cases, like this is a whole different version that feels stronger than it used to be. And it can be easy to get frustrated and to get down on yourself and to feel like, man, I haven't made any progress. But like I already mentioned at the beginning of the trip, with just that nonsense with the milk 2 times in a row, and the fact that we laughed it off and that we didn't let it affect our moods, and that we're able to see it as kind of a high point of the trip to be an in joke of humor for the future. That's progress. And so as we played even more pickleball, because once we finished the tournament, we went and got some really good food from a Mediterranean food truck. And then we tried to see if there was a movie to watch, and there really wasn't anything to see. And we didn't feel like shopping or doing anything else. So it was like, hey, we could just play some more pickleball. So we found a place and we were both down for it. And this isn't something we have the schedule to get to do usually. So we found another place to go play pickleball. And as the night wore on, and we were playing really well at the beginning, but then not our best later on, I found myself being more vocal about my frustration. Like, hey, come on, get it together. Why'd you do that? Things like that. And Shaun was not doing the same to me. He was being very gracious. And I could tell that I was doing it. He was keeping his attitude up and we were having fun, but I wasn't reining my tongue in. And the Bible talks about the fact that the tongue is like a raging fire. It's like a horse without a bridle. It's like a ship without a rudder. There are some really strong biblical analogies for how out of control things can get when you let your tongue have free reign. And I don't know that I was having free reign. I wasn't saying every thought that came into my head, but, and I talk about this in the gentleness challenge, there is an element of allowing your emotions to inform your behavior and your decisions that then elevates and accelerates those emotions. And while I recognized it to some extent, I felt like we were still okay. I was still okay. I was kind of letting myself go there. So we had a great meal that evening, a great rest of our evening. And then the next day, we still didn't have anything particularly that we wanted to do more than play more pickleball. So we went back to the same place in the afternoon and played some more pickleball. And at a certain point, I was feeling convicted already that I needed to be more encouraging, but I was not necessarily doing my best at it. And at a certain point, he says, hey, just really directly, calmly, kindly, it's not helping me, it's not helping anything for you to express your frustration. I know it is frustrating when we don't do our best, but since it's not helping and I'm not saying anything to you when you mess up, maybe you could extend the same courtesy. And I said, yep, you're right. Absolutely right. I'm sorry. I'll do better. And as I was walking to the bathroom, I want to tell you some of the thoughts going through my head because maybe you've experienced these thoughts too. And this is just being very, very honest and vulnerable with you because I would love to say that I have matured past ever having thoughts like this. But as I was walking to the bathroom and feeling that frustration welling in my chest again, we just lost a game, which on the one hand, my logical brain can say doesn't matter. It's just pickleball. On the other hand, my emotional brain says matters because you could have done better and then you would have felt better, which of course is bad theology because that's tying your joy to your circumstances. That's something that I preach against all the time to myself, to others, and yet we can fall prey to it. And it's not because we don't believe what we say. It's because that sanctification process is an ongoing one. And it's an ongoing journey of recognizing the sin, recognizing our propensity for wanting to excuse ourselves from the truth of that sin. Like, yes, that's a principle, but it probably doesn't apply to me in this particular instance because somehow, I'm exempt. I'm better than I'm not doing it like that. It's not really a sin in my case. And of course it is. As I was walking to the bathroom, feeling frustrated, I thought, okay, so he's right. I need to extend the same kind of grace that he's extending to me because I'm not playing perfectly by any stretch. I need to be kind. Of course, I need to speak words of life. I'm struggling with that. It wasn't that everything I said was negative. I was definitely telling him when he made a good shot too, but I was being too free with my critical speech. And so as I'm walking to the bathroom, what I was warring with was, okay, so I have these emotions and what do I do with them? If I have the frustration, and you're more of a vocal person, do you just stuff it? Do you just push it deep down until you eventually explode? Is that the only option? And my brain was just talking back to me because the Holy Spirit's there whispering in your ear. No, you bring it under the Lordship of Jesus Christ. You take every thought captive. You submit yourself to God's will, and God's will for you in Christ Jesus, which is made very clear in the Bible in multiple places, is that we are to give thanks in all circumstances, to pray continually, to rejoice always. I wasn't doing any of those things terribly well in that moment. And it was because of something as silly as pickleball. But listen, the Lord uses seemingly silly things to teach us really deep lessons sometimes. And so I thought, okay, you have the emotions. Those aren't going away. The frustration is welling up in you without your summoning it. It's coming of its own free will. But do you have a will in Christ to overcome it? And of course, I knew the answer was yes. If we are in Christ, we are new creations. We're not bound to our sin. We may feel just like Paul talks about that we still struggle with it. Like, oh man, I don't do what I want to do. I do what I don't want to do. I'm so wretched. Who can save me? The answer is Jesus. And so even with pickleball, the answer is Jesus. So as I walked back, I just thought, just keep your mouth shut. Regardless of how you feel, keep your mouth shut, unless it's something kind to say. And I would love to tell you that I did it perfectly, and I don't think I did. I think there were a couple of times that I, burst out with, something that was not entirely positive. And Shaun, who listens to this, is probably, oh yeah, you did. I remember. But I was making a concerted effort to keep my mouth shut if something happened that I didn't like, and to recognize when I was struggling and not playing well, and the fact that he was being kind and keeping his mouth shut as well. And then I also was making efforts to enthusiastically praise the things that he was doing well, because he is a very good pickleball player and he was doing a lot of things well. And so, surprise, surprise, wonder upon wonder, something that I should already know was probably going to happen. What did I find? I found that my emotions fell in line with my actions, whereas they had been leading and kind of holding my actions by the tail and my attitude by the tail and swinging them around. And I found that even when he missed a shot, or even when we were down, or even when we lost, I did not feel as frustrated. Now, I've talked about this with the gentleness challenge. I'll put the link in the show notes if you don't know what that is, but where it's 30 days of kind speech and you either keep your mouth shut or you say something neutral in a kind voice, or you say something positive and encouraging and affirming in a kind voice, but you don't nag, you don't berate, you don't say every negative thought that comes into your head. And miraculously, you don't think as many of those thoughts anymore, and you don't feel as many of those negative emotions anymore. And I experienced the exact same thing. So that was something that I am continually learning, failing at, then kind of climbing up a little, getting a little better, then sliding back a little bit and going forward. So obviously the goal is to make it up the hill not to just stay stuck and camp out where you are to slide all the way back down. But I share that very authentically with you as a personal struggle and something seemingly silly, because the Lord was just so clearly speaking to me, and in the kind, direct words of my husband, like, I'm not doing it to you. Don't do it to me. Yep. Yes, sir. Got it. You were right. So we started out the trip with something that made us realize that we had come a ways from where we used to be. And then in the middle of the trip, I found myself struggling with something that I would have thought in the past that I had gotten over, that I was over the hump, and that wasn't going to be a struggle for me anymore. That's like when you're a teenager, right? Nope. Apparently 42-year-old Abby can still struggle with that. And then at the end of our trip, after we finished playing our third round of pickleball, and we were heading to Anthropologie, which is my favorite clothing and decor store, although it's very expensive. So I usually only go shop the sale racks. We were going to this Anthropologie that was near a dinner place that I wanted to take Shaun. And I didn't have anything particularly that I needed, but they were having an extra 40% off their sale. And I was like, I'll just go browse the sale racks for a couple of minutes. Well, that's exactly what I did. We parked, we went inside. I was in the sale area for 10, 12 minutes maybe. And Shaun was just being the good husband in the corner on his phone, while he waited for me. I didn't find anything but a set of 4 taper candles. Check out, we go back to the car, and I climb in my side. He starts to climb in, and all of a sudden I hear him say, "Oh no." And I turn around and look at him through the driver's window and think, what's wrong? And then I look back behind the driver's window to the window right behind it and realize that it's completely busted out. And in the 10 minutes that we had gone inside this Anthropologie, someone had come, busted out our window, and stolen some bags that we had in the back because we were traveling. So we had an overnight bag, a pickleball bag, and I had this big leather bag that I carry all of my skincare and my makeup and my contact solution and, toothbrush and just all of that stuff. And they had taken all 3 of those. So there's glass everywhere. This is not the first time this has happened to us. And it always surprises me the sheer amount of just shattered glass that's everywhere that you're trying to avoid cutting yourself on. It's all over your stuff. And at first we thought they had just gotten his pickleball bag. And then as we assessed the situation, we realized that they had gotten my overnight bag, which had my laptop in it, which was the biggest loss for sure. Thankfully, I don't save any of my books or work that I do to the actual device. I save it to a cloud because things like this can happen, or the laptop can fry and die. And so that was not a concern, but just it's an expensive piece of equipment to replace, and there were other things on it. And so that was gone, and a lot of my personal belongings were gone. Some of them were things that we didn't go shopping much, but we did buy a couple more outfits to play pickleball in because our other ones were sweaty. So clothes we had just bought were stolen. Multiple really nice paddles, pickleball paddles were stolen. And it feels so violating and so just jarring to realize that someone has invaded your personal space and taken things that belong to you. And so in that moment, we're just trying to figure out what we should do. We go in and we talk to the Anthropologie employees. They get the security guard to come, and he essentially tells us, kind of, you're out of luck. Like, you can report it to the police, but there aren't any security cameras. It was in a really nice area in Dallas, but the way that the parking lot is situated with an alley and a one-way street, there's a lot of blind spots if you get on one side of the car, which is the side of the car that they got on. And I even had people on social media saying, like, you shouldn't have had anything in the back and you should have taken all of your bags inside. And hindsight is 2020, and I get that. And it would have probably been smart to, put a blanket over everything. But when you're going inside a store for a very limited amount of time, it never occurs to you this is going to happen. And yet it did. And what I loved was Shaun's response. Neither one of us were devastated. We're both just bummed. And we really did, for about 10 minutes after it happened, keep finding new bags that were missing. I think there were 3 total, plus maybe one other thing. But 3 total. It's like, at first we thought it was one, that was another, and then it was another. And it was like, oh no, this is gone too. Oh man, we're going to have to replace this. And just the hassle. Yes, the expense for sure. It's not going to make any sense for us to file on insurance. We've already checked. There's nothing the Dallas PD is going to do about it. We've already checked. There's no way to get our belongings back because we don't even live in Dallas. So even if they decided to dump them all in the parking lot again because there wasn't much usable to them, we're not going to see it, that kind of thing. So it was just basically a complete loss of those things. And there were quite a few, like I said, things that were useful to us that we employ on the daily, that we had invested time and money in. And yet Shaun's response was, he said, I'm going to go see if they have some tape because it wasn't super cold, but it was chilly. It was in the 40s. He said, I'm going to go see if they have some tape. I think I have a plastic bag in the back. He said, I'm taping up this window and we are still going to dinner. We are not going to let them rob us of the joy of this last night's meal together before we go back to our family. I don't know that he said it quite like that, but it was essentially that concept. And I just loved him. I love him for so many things, but I just loved him for that just kind of steadfast refusal to be flattened by something that could really have taken the wind out of our sails after what we had been telling each other all weekend was one of the most relaxing and enjoyable and mutually just gratifying weekends that we'd had away in a long time, because sometimes we get to travel together, but usually it's for a speaking event for me or a work event for him. There is some stress involved, and deadlines and things that don't feel relaxing. And to have something where we were just doing things that we both enjoy. I was going to say we got to sleep in, but I think I slept till 7:18 in the morning. So that's about as much as my brain will let me sleep in these days. But just to see his response was like, nope, we are not going to let this dampen our joy. We are going to wring every last drop out of this time away. We're not going home with our tails between our legs, and we're going to just be thankful. I thought it was such a tangible example of giving thanks in all circumstances, rejoicing always, praying continually. And it's an opportunity to pray for those. The Bible talks about praying for those who persecute you. I know that this wasn't a specific persecution of me and my husband. It wasn't personal. And yet just the whole process of replacing, I'm recording this podcast on, one of our kids' school laptops, and, it died in the middle of the podcast and I had to go find the charger for it, and it doesn't work as well as it's a hassle. And in our flesh, when things are a hassle and things are added onto our plates, when our plates already feel full, it's easy to be so resentful. And yet, one, I'm grateful that the Lord really did keep both of us from feeling a great deal of resentment. Two, I'm grateful that it was just things and not threat to life or loss of life. Someone actually corrected me when I used the word robbery and said, no, you mean burglary. I guess robbery, the difference is that there is a threat of force or violence as someone takes something directly from you, whereas burglary is theft of your belongings when you're not there. So, semantics, but I get it. So it was not robbery, it was burglary. There was no threat to our life. And I hope and pray genuinely that there is something in there that will convict / bless the person who took it to the point that it could turn them to Christ. It doesn't seem like material belongings necessarily would do that, but who knows? The Lord can use anything. So I know I sound very altruistic. It's not like I felt just super warm and fuzzy toward whoever did this or felt happy that it happened, but it felt good to be with a man who could take it in stride. We did go and have a very lovely dinner, have a really good time. And as we walked back to our car with our taped up window, we were joking about whether we would find our car burglarized again. I had actually pulled anything left that belonged to us and stuffed it under seats and covered it with blankets. But if someone had wanted to get into the car, they could have. And joking about the fact that it probably wasn't going to get burgled again as long as someone went in the right side of it, because they were going to realize they'd been too late and we're going to get slim pickings anyway. It was an eventful weekend in many ways. And it was a lot of good reminders about some base truths about Christian stewardship of our emotions and relationships. It was a really sweet time to shore up our marriage and just enjoy being around each other. Like I said, ate some really good food. I'll even put the restaurants in the show notes in case you're a Dallas person and want to check out our recommendations, because we had really great food while we were there. But I just wanted to tell that story to you today, because I'm guessing that some of you are going through similar things, similar small frustrations, big frustrations, hassles, things that feel like they could get blown out of proportion, or maybe their proportion is so large that you're not sure how you're going to overcome them. And I just want to be that voice that says, I get it. I don't always do super well with it. I don't always control my emotions, but I do know that the principles of submitting those emotions to the will of Christ, of being willing to recognize and pivot, of being direct and kind with our spouse, of being encouraging instead of negative, of taking things in stride, of not blaming each other and letting something that's frustrating blow up into something that ruins your experience or ruins the way your relationship is interacting. That those are all life principles and marriage principles that would serve all of us well. And I saw them in action in multiple cases this past weekend. And I really found myself thanking God for a husband who is so even keeled, who does take things with a giant grain of salt, who is encouraging, who is able to speak up when he sees sin in me, and to hear from me if I see something that needs saying. That's not just, negativity or my competitiveness coming out. And I just wanted to take this podcast to testify to God's principles being true. They hold water and they can be trusted. And I guess next time we go to Dallas, if we go to Dallas, we will do a better job of hiding our belongings, even when we're in some bougie part of town where it doesn't seem like it would happen. So hang in there, friends. Regardless of what your Valentine's Day weekend looks like, or regardless of where you are in your relationships with your spouse, if you're married, I want to encourage you that the Lord is there. I'm always ending my podcast. He's there. He's with you. He sees you. He's walking beside you. He is for you and is rooting for you as you press into his principles each and every day, knowing that they will hold fast. If you enjoy the M is for Mama podcast, I would be so honored if you would subscribe and follow along, maybe share with friends, or even leave a review. And if you want more content on motherhood and biblical responses to cultural issues, be sure to follow along on Instagram at m.is.for.mama.